Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the Path to Liberty. This is the Fast Friday edition of the show for May 22nd, 2020. And on this episode, we're talking about civil asset forfeiture and how it's a driving force, one of the leading ones behind the increasingly nationalized and militarized police state. First of all, my name is Michael Bolden. We broadcast live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time from here in my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. You can find all the various platforms we're on. We do live streaming on video. We also have archive video platforms, archive audio-only podcast editions. Find all of those platforms, all of the previous episodes, and we post every individual episode and put all kinds of links and references for you to read and learn further about the topic that I've discussed for each show. You can also find our email newsletter. You can follow us on social media and even support us financially with our membership program, which starts out as little as $2 a month. We make it go a long, long way here at the TAC, and I'm very grateful for all the support of the many people who have been pitching in and helping us keep moving forward every single day. Find all of that information and more on the show homepage. It's 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty, all spelled out. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. And I am so very grateful for you spending some of your time with me today. But since it's Fast Friday, I'm not going to take up too much of your time. Let's see if I can get this done in about 10 to 15 minutes. And with local police all around the country, and it's not just in the big cities like here in LA or Chicago, New York, San Francisco, even some of the small towns are really arming up and looking more and more like an occupying army rather than peace officers. So this is the third episode that I've done recently looking at the driving forces behind this mess for the Constitution and liberty. First of all, back on May 6th, I did an episode, an overview of federal programs that militarize and nationalize local police. Of course, we're following the money, and in that episode, I covered three main federal grant programs which hands out money and gear, whether it's military hardware or surveillance gear and the like, to local police. And of course, all that stuff comes with strings attached. It also included in that episode joint task forces, where local law enforcement actually are deputized and act as federal agents. They're not even local law enforcement anymore. And many times what happens is once they're part of this federal joint task force, then they can skirt state laws restricting their activity on surveillance, for example, or asset forfeiture. So that's a very important episode. I hope you'll check out if you haven't yet. Then the following week, I did another episode, The Origins of Militarized Police, from peace officer to command and control, going all the way back to Prohibition, the Civil Rights era, and the like. Going through this great article by Sam Jacobs at ammo.com. I'm going to cover some of his work, or a lot of his work, in this episode as well. And now today we're going to again, follow the money. And we're talking about civil asset forfeiture, which I think is a huge part of the problem that we're facing right now. And without getting into too much detail, here's a quick overview of asset forfeiture, civil asset forfeiture, from the Institute for Justice. It's ij.org. I will include this link where I'm reading in the show notes at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. This is from their Policing for Profit. And it's a pretty powerful name, although they make profit sound bad, which it isn't. And that's just another episode. But this is when I think it's pretty self-explanatory when you check this out. Civil forfeiture, they write, is a mechanism by which law enforcement agencies can seize and keep property on the mere suspicion that it is connected to a crime, just under suspicion of it. In contrast to criminal forfeiture, where property is taken only after a criminal conviction, civil forfeiture allows law enforcement to take property from innocent people who have never been formally accused of a crime, let alone convicted of one. And whether it's cash, a car, a boat, a home, or computers, or anything in between, once government says they believe it's the proceeds of a crime or was involved in criminal activity, You have to prove otherwise, and that is almost impossible, especially for average people. And IJ, in their research, they've often pointed out that a vast majority of these forfeiture cases, a vast majority are for small dollar amounts, $1,000, a couple $1,000, $500. And when you're talking about that from people lower on the income scale, they can't afford an attorney to fight government to get their stuff back, and often they don't even go through the trouble because they're working so much because government will just, a quick aside, the Federal Reserve is destroying the purchasing power of the dollar, and that makes everyone have to work more. So this is a really great way to bring people to their knees and then take even more of the stuff after they've been stealing from you in the first place. IJ goes on, they say this evasion of the criminal justice system is based on a legal fiction. I like how they put that. A legal fiction in which property thought to be connected to an alleged crime is considered guilty. They put guilty in quotes of having somehow assisted in the commission of that crime. In criminal forfeiture, the government proceeds against a person charged with a crime. In civil forfeiture, the government proceeds against property. And again, once they've claimed that your computer is a crime-aiding computer, you proving it otherwise means you're probably just going to have to buy another computer to replace it. Anyways, over here to Sam's article from ammo.com, which we just republished this week. He has this section, Civil Asset Forfeiture, Big Business for Police. He writes, civil asset forfeiture has exploded since 1986, when total seizures were about $94 million. By 2005, so in 20 years, it passed the 1 billion mark. And that was double, almost double just the year before. And by 2010, it jumped to 2.5 billion, with more than 15,000 forfeiture cases, 11,000, a vast majority of these forfeitures, although some people say, well, these are criminals they're going after. Well, if they're going after criminals, why are the vast majority, 11,000 out of 15,000, civil? It's because they aren't getting criminal convictions. They're stealing. Sam goes on. He says, by 2014, this figure climbed to $4.5 billion, with $29 billion total seized between 2001 and 2014. They increased 1,500% in just a short period from 85 to 91, an increase of over 26 times. I mean, it's insane how rapidly it started growing. And we'll get some hints as to why 1986, the mid 80s and onward were kind of a problem for that. But it does drive this type of thing, taking in all that cash, if you think about it. And that's maybe why the Policing for Profit is the title of the IJ Institute for Justice report. Because when you're taking in all that cash, think of the perverse motives. It incentivizes certain actions. And Sam puts it this way, civil asset forfeiture isn't just effectively a legalized form of theft. It also drives and indeed incentivizes bad policing. And there's ample evidence, he says. For example, a 1994 study found that police delay drug busts to increase the value of a forfeiture. They want more cash. A 2001 study of 1,400 police departments, 1,400 of them, published in the Journal of Criminal Justice, found that half of the departments surveyed agreed that civil asset forfeiture was necessary as a budget supplement. In other words, they've got their annual budget, and if they don't take enough stuff, they don't make their budget. And then they have to cut back on hiring. And then the law enforcement unions have serious problems. And you have this really perverted incentive structure that keeps going. And as we've seen in recent years, a handful of states taking really good action on both state and federal asset forfeiture programs to restrict or opt out of them. And one of the biggest concerns that keeps coming up, we saw this happen pretty prominently in New Mexico, which now has some of the best restrictions on asset forfeiture, although there's still more work to do. But the Albuquerque Police Department was basically arguing against it, lobbying against this, saying, well, without asset forfeiture, we can't pay for our department. So once you actually have a police department that expands in size, enforces a bunch of unconstitutional acts, a lot of them federal, we're talking drug war, gun control, and the like, then they need the budget to pay for it, and it's coming from stealing things. And then what happens if they stop stealing? It shows a serious problem underneath. Sam goes on, he said, far more disturbing is the 2004 report showing that police departments even keep wish lists for items they wish to obtain via civil asset forfeiture. You couldn't imagine if they have a wish list, let's say they want a 1972 Buick Regal. I don't know, this is a car I had as a kid. Well, maybe when they see one, they're going to claim that it was being driven by a drug dealer. And this may sound absurd, but this type of thing actually happens. And Sam's article actually gives some interesting examples as well. I encourage you to read it when you have a chance. He says, to provide some context, in 2014, the total amount of civil asset forfeitures was $4.5 billion. And the property stolen in burglaries was $3.9 billion. So asset forfeiture, police, government is taking more money by over $500 million, more money than burglars. So if we have a crime or a robbery problem, a burglary problem in this country, certainly the leading problem is government. It's law enforcement agencies. Going a little bit further here, IJ puts it this way: just as troubling, giving law enforcement a financial stake in civil forfeiture distorts law enforcement priorities. Allowing law enforcement agencies to reap financial benefits from forfeiture encourages the pursuit of property over the impartial administration of justice. Not the saying that that's really how it would play out without forfeiture, but it certainly removes a layer of stealing. They go further, providing a financial incentive is problem enough. But most civil forfeiture laws also make seizing and forfeiting the property disconcertingly easy. Civil forfeiture stacks the deck against property owners from the outset. In most jurisdictions and for most type of property, all police need to seize something is probable cause to believe that the cash, car, or other property is connected to a crime that permits civil forfeiture. And once property is seized, the onus is on owners to file a legal claim to get it back. And most of the time, they can't do anything about it. Now, surprise, surprise, who's driving a lot of this? The federal government. Even when the states are being terrible, just like as I covered in the previous two episodes on this militarized local police or nationalized police state, a lot of times the motivation, the push is coming from Washington, D.C. And Sam, in his article, he points out going back to 1984, civil asset forfeiture, he says, entered a new phase that year. The Comprehensive Crime Control Act, championed by then President Ronald Reagan, allowed for police agencies to keep the assets they seized. This highly incentivized the seizure of assets for the purpose of funding police departments rather than pursuing criminal charges. Now, first of all, what does the federal government have to do? What power delegated to the federal government in the Constitution authorizes them to say what law enforcement can do? And authorize law enforcement to steal stuff? Absolutely not. This is totally unconstitutional, but it's based on a 1984 law pushed by Ronald Reagan, the so-called great conservative. Going further, the game changed completely in 1996, Sam writes, the year of the landmark Supreme Court decision, Bennis versus Michigan. There's a link to it, so when you're reading this, you can learn a little bit more about it. And he explains a little bit about Tina Bennis and the problems that she had. He said this opinion held that the innocent owner defense was not sufficient to recover assets seized during civil asset forfeiture. So even if you're innocent personally, and they're still making a case that your property, your vehicle, for example, in Tina's case, is guilty, then they can still keep it. So two federal acts, one a so-called law signed by Ronald Reagan, and then another from the Supreme Court has really, really ramped it up. And you see from 1984 and then through 1996 and going forward how the increase in asset forfeiture has gone up exponentially. And it won't stop unless states and local communities opt out. And then, of course, we're talking about equitable sharing again. Sam, and this is the federal asset forfeiture program. And Sam writes, as if civil asset forfeiture wasn't bad enough on its own, there is also a process allowing police to circumvent existing laws on a state level. It's called equitable sharing, and it's a gold mine for both the federal government and local police departments. Here's how it works. State and local law enforcement, let's say they're restricted from doing civil asset forfeiture. Let's say state law says they can't. So what they do is they're like, well, this looks like a federal drug case or a federal gun case. So we're going to call up the Department of Justice or whatever partner, federal partner, DHS, whatever, and we'll see if they'll accept this as a federal case. And then through a process called adoption, the feds take the lead on the case. The local law enforcement still does all the legwork. Then they seize the property. They're acting as federal agents. They're no longer restricted by state law. This is nuts. You may even think it's as crazy as I do, but it's real. They pass all the property to the federal government. Then the feds keep 20% and divvy 80% out. So this incentivizes, even in those states where they restrict civil asset forfeiture, the federal government still comes in and pushes them to steal more stuff. Now, if you want more details on asset forfeiture, the federal program, the state program, etc., I did an episode last June, Asset Forfeiture is Theft, an overview of state and federal programs. You can get all the details of how that plays out rather than this just short overview. Well, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something. That's the most important thing. And I hope you are as happy, as safe, and as healthy as can be, and as stocked up too. I really appreciate you spending a little time with me today. If you support the show, there's a number of free actions you can take, like smashing the like button, subscribing, leaving reviews. All that stuff triggers the algorithm of the platform you listen or watch on, and it tells the platform to show the program to more people. And if you really want to kick in and support us, you can do so financially. It's as little as $2 a month for our membership program. That's 10thamendmentcenter.com/members, all spelled out. 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me today. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week here on the Path to Liberty.